Hey Keith, this is a really quick one. I wanted to talk really briefly about custom editors. That's what they're called, but they're basically mono behavior editors. And so if you look at, for instance, Rewired, you've got the input manager script, and you'll notice that it looks weird. It has a bunch of like custom stuff. It's got a button. It's got this warning text, yada yada yada. If I was to go so handy here, the little cog and hit edit script and then reload all. Uh, yes, I want to save the change that I had made there already. Um, it will do that a lot of times if you're in the, if it has to reload the assembly, it won't actually open the script you said. All right, so here's the script actually said. So if I'm in here, this is inputmanager.cs. This is a overall class here. So I should be an input manager base inherits from mono behavior. So I should be able to just come in here and say public string debug text string.empty, right? And then I should be able to assign into debug text in the front end of this, right? When that finishes compiling, I should see debug text appear here and suspense, boom, it doesn't show up. The reason for that is that this is not using the default auto-generated editor. Instead, it is using an editor class for the input manager class or input manager base. I don't know which. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a search for input manager, and then I will look and I will see it's going to be under the editor subgroup somewhere. Da, 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 custom editor type of input manager. And so here you'll see this is in the editor project. So it's a separate DLL that only gets created for if you're actually in the Unity editor. And it is instantiating that and it does whatever it wants to do. Now there's an internal editor, which it's creating for reasons passing understanding. Oh my goodness, there's another one. And so there's some tree of, oh my goodness. It has a whole lot of inheritance going on and I don't really care. Um, but at any rate, one of the things I was complaining about before was on main game camera, this was scrolling super slow. Right now it's compiling, so it's not scrolling. But underneath, once it finishes compiling, it was just absolutely murderously slow to scroll this up and down. The reason was that something that the IRTS camera script was doing in its editor script was making it really, really laggy. Now, it had not been that way in Unity 5.4, so some sort of API change between 5.4 and 5.5 made it so that suddenly whatever was happening in this was insanely slow. Now, I hadn't gone back in to figure out what that was. Ultimately, what I looked at was there anything in the custom editor that I actually cared about? And as I looked through it, I thought, no. And so I just deleted the custom editor class, and you'll notice that in the most recent check-in. And so now it winds up showing up a little bit differently. Like when you see the Amplify Bloom one, this one has a custom editor. Which is probably a much nicer one. And so I'll do a search for Amplify Bloom effect. Let's see here. Yep, here is the editor for that. Oh, are you kidding me? All right, so here's the custom editor for that. It's got some private fields and so forth that it's serializing. Good grief, I hate it when they do the code like this, but it's only for the editor, but still. They have a lot of custom foldouts and stuff that they've made, which is why they've made it the way they did. You can turn stuff on and off and fold them out as you do, which is, kind of handy. But still, oh, um, in the IRTS camera, however, this is just the raw. What do you see is what you get. Uh, I do kind of a mixture. Generally speaking, I try and avoid making editor classes unless I have a good reason to do so. If I am uh, wanting those extra pieces of functionality that make an editor class, I make custom editor classes for various things like the uh, Arkin object manipulator, which is here. And this is something that has various little extra tools that I find very handy, but it's not something that you would use a whole lot. It's really more tools for Synth or myself on the art side. So it's just another example of where being able to customize the Unity editor is really helpful in a whole lot of ways. But there are some kind of rabbit holes that you can wind up going down in custom code where you're like, hey, why is there a button here? Why can't I add, debug text or, whatever it is on top of that? That's how you find the custom editors, and that's how you can make your own. And just make sure that anything that is in a subfolder is directly. Remember how I told you that anything in a resources subfolder gets combined into that other kind of meta class? Same deal with anything that is an editor uh, subfolder. If it says editor like this, then anything in a tree underneath that goes into that other DLL. And you can see that basically being extant in where you've got the main class, then main class or main DLL, main DLL dot editor, and then there's actually main DLL dot editor dot plugins and main DLL dot plugins as well. And the plugins is a special folder name as well. And the reason for having a separate plugins one is that uh, plugins are not recompiled when the main DLL is recompiled, which is really useful for when you want to stick a bunch of code that are plugins and don't really change very often into a sub area. And there's a magic folder here called standard assets, which comes even before plugins. And so we stick some of our code in various places to affect both the compile order and how frequently or infrequently those things get compiled. Thanks to the new Unity compiler, mono compiler, uh, that's no longer remotely such an issue in general, but overall there are um, six possible, six possible main compilations. You've got the main DLL, the main DLL editor, the standard assets, the standard assets editor, I guess. Yeah, there would be one. Um, the plugins and the plugins editor, and that's it in terms of DLLs. Then of course the resources folder is magic as well, and creates a separate bundle that you can index into, like I was talking about on the Skype call today. But really, you don't have to particularly know much about that. But if you're ever looking for something and you're like, hey, why can't I find the thing I'm looking for? That's probably why. Um, and you'll notice that, these things get compiled independently. So that's pretty handy, actually. All right, so this is a short one. Thanks.